everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you've never been here before. Hey! So in today's video we will be discussing the case of Elizabeth Shorts, or the Black Dahlia. So this video is actually meant for Halloween, so it's a little bit graphic. So if you do happen to see this after Halloween, then I'm so sorry. So if you want to know more about Elizabeth Shorts and how she got the name the Black Dahlia, then keep on watching. Around 10 a.m. on October 15th, 1947, a young lady, her name was Betty Bersinger, she was actually pushing her daughter in a stroller in Leimert Park. Leimert Park, or is it Leimert Park? Sorry if I'm saying that wrong. In Leimert Park section of South Los Angeles, when something caught her eyes. At first, she thought it was a mannequin, but as she got closer, she realized that it was a naked female body. Betty ran to a neighbor's house in shock to call the police so they can come and take a look at what she saw. So the LAPD came, the reporters came, and everybody was literally in shock from what they saw. The next day, an autopsy was conducted, and it was confirmed that the body belonged to 22-year-old Elizabeth Shorts. So Elizabeth Shorts was born on July 29th, 1924 in Medford, Massachusetts, to her parents Phoebe and Cleo Shorts. So when Elizabeth was 5 years old, her father actually disappeared. Later on, they found his car abandoned at a lake, which lead them to believe that he committed suicide. However, a few years later, he did return home and apologized to his wife for leaving his family and, apologizing to the kids. But at this point, there was no turning back because, they thought you died. They literally already grieved your loss. They don't want to see you anymore. So his wife ended up not taking him back, so he decided to move to Vallejo, California. So when Elizabeth was 16 years old, she developed a passion for acting in theaters. She just wanted to do so much more than just being in her hometown, because I'm guessing it was just like a small hometown. So she wanted to get into Hollywood and the whole acting world. So she figured that she was not going to be able to accomplish those dreams in her hometown. So then this is when she reached out to her dad. He's in California, and things happen in California, so she asked him could she move out there to stay with him. So at the time he was working, and he agreed that she could come and stay with him, but in return she could just help him around the house, like cook and clean for him since he's busy at work. So she agreed to it and then decided to move out to California to stay with him. But that was very, very short-lived. After just about a month of staying with her father decided to kick her out because she was a rebel, basically, like most teenagers. She started dating a lot of men. So Elizabeth was known as very, very beautiful. She was basically a dream girl at the time. So it wasn't really hard for her to get a man, and her father did not like that at all. So since she was going out late at night, partying and drinking and coming home at like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, she wasn't able to cook for him nor clean like they agreed for her to do. So he decided to kick her out. At this point, Elizabeth was just staying with different friends. She didn't really have a place to stay. She did not want to move back to Massachusetts, so she ended up getting a job on a military base, where she ended up working there for about 9 months. Then after that, she decided, that was enough for her, because she has dreams that she wants to pursue. Working at that job was just not happening for her. So after 9 months, she decided to quit the job and move to San Diego, California, where she actually ran into a lady. Her name was Dorothy. And Dorothy actually worked at an all-night theater. So she was telling Dorothy how she didn't necessarily have a plan and what her goals were at the time. Like, she wanted to become an actress and she didn't have a plan. She didn't have anywhere to stay. So Dorothy told Elizabeth that she can stay at her house, But Elizabeth only ended up staying there for about a month before she decided that, she wanted to go somewhere else. So around the mid 1943, Elizabeth, she was actually dating an Air Force sergeant who happened to be very abusive. So she ended up leaving him. But around this time, she was actually arrested. She was arrested for drunk driving. She was ordered to move back to her hometown in Massachusetts, but she refused to move back there, so she ended up moving to Florida instead. So in Florida, she actually started dating a lieutenant who actually was gonna marry her, but then he ended up dying before he could marry her. So this is when she decided to move back to California, and then she was staying with Dorothy again for a little while until she decided to leave Dorothy. So when she left Dorothy, she left with a guy by the name of Red. So after Elizabeth's body was found, the LAPD, they really struggled with this case. So they decided to track down the person who did the 911 call-in to see if she had any more information on the case, basically. So after about 9 days of looking for her, they ended up finding her, but she said that she didn't have much more information about the case because she didn't went back to the scene, because at the time she had her daughter and she didn't really want her daughter to be around a dead body, which is understandable. So when Elizabeth's body was found, I just have to say this, it's gonna get a little bit graphic, so yeah. But when Elizabeth's body was found, so basically her body was cut in half. So she was cut at the torso, and like half of her body was one section, and then the other half was at another section. So there was a cut by her jaw lines, which actually gave her like a Joker smile. And also the weird thing about this is that her body was basically drained from all the blood that she had. So she was pretty much pale, like extremely pale. So this is why the person who called 911, at first she thought it was a mannequin, because her body was extremely pale. It was evident that the person who killed her didn't kill her at that site, that she was actually killed and then moved and then was put there because they probably wanted her to be found, so the person just left her body there. Also, police came to that conclusion because there was no blood at the crime scene at all. Like not even an ounce of blood. So there were other marks and brandings on her body, including a tic-tac-toe sketch on her hips, which is very disturbing. So when police notified Cleo, who was Elizabeth's father, he basically wanted no parts in the whole investigation. So when police told him that, your daughter is dead and we need you to come down to identify the body, he was basically drunk at his house, and he said he didn't really give a shit. He literally said that, like, that's crazy. He said that he didn't give a shit if she was dead, and he refused to go down to the county to identify her body. So her mom actually had to go down and identify her body, but the way her mom found out that she was dead was actually really scary, because the media, they actually got a hold of the case, and then a reporter actually called her and started questioning her about Elizabeth. So basically the reporter told Elizabeth's mom that Elizabeth won a beauty contest and she needed information about Elizabeth because she won the beauty contest. And then later on, she basically came clean and told her that, they found your daughter dead and this is why they're calling her, which is crazy. Like, that's just so messed up. So her mom went down immediately to go identify her body. So the police decided that they would go back to Dorothy, basically the young lady that Elizabeth was living with at the time before Red picked her up. So they decided that they would go back to Dorothy to basically see if they can get more information on this guy, Red. So they went and they questioned Dorothy. So she just told them that she just know that he went by the name of Red and he drove a 1939 Studebaker coupe. So they decided to start check local motels and just like other places in the area just to see if anyone had checked in under that vehicle. So finally, they did found a motel close by. So someone checked into the motel basically with a vehicle that matches the description of Red's vehicle. So they ended up gathering all the information from the motel, and then they found out that the vehicle actually belonged to Robert Manley. So they went ahead and they took a picture of Robert Manley. I was gonna say Manley. Is it Manley or Manley? Could be Manley. So they took a picture of Robert Manley and decided to go back to Dorothy and ask Dorothy if this is the guy that Elizabeth left with. And Dorothy was like, yes, that is him. So then they were like, bingo, we got our guy. So they decided that they would do like a background check and look into Robert's past. So they actually saw that Robert actually lived in South Beach, California, and he was married, and he was also a sales engineer. They also found out that on January 17th, basically 2 days after Elizabeth's body was found, that Robert actually went out of town. He took a trip with a friend called Harry, and they went out of town. So basically, since Robert wasn't at home, they did decided to look for Harry, but Harry went on the trip with Robert, so they wasn't able to find Harry neither. But they did went to Harry's place and just started snooping around a little bit. So when they looked in Harry's garage, they actually noticed that Robert's vehicle was there in his garage. They decided that they would stake out and wait for both of the men to come back so they can bring them in for questioning. So they actually waited and they waited and they waited, and then 2 days go by, and then that's when both men decided to scroll in from their trip. So when they both came back, they took Robert in for questioning. They questioned Robert and they searched his vehicle, and at first they had arrested him, but obviously upon their findings, they actually found out that he didn't do it, and he also did 2 polygraph tests and passed both of them. So they ended up letting him go because they just didn't have anything. So they ended up letting him go. But when the media found out about this, they basically gave him hell. Like, they were just so convinced that he did it, even though they had no proof. They were just so convinced that he did it because obviously Elizabeth, she was this beautiful, beautiful young lady who went missing, and the media just became obsessed because they wanted to know who did this. And basically the way that her body was found as well was just very scary. So people were like really scared. So, you know, they just wanted to know who could have been so evil to do this to her. And around this time, this is when the media decided to give Elizabeth Short the nickname the Black Dahlia. Basically, her nickname stemmed from her hair because apparently she had like really beautiful, big, puffy hair, and she always wore a bow in her hair. So this is where the name the Black Dahlia stemmed from, which is really cute. I like that. And also, oh God, no, I probably shouldn't have said that. And also, apparently they said that she liked to wear lacy black underwears. I don't know how they know that, but apparently that's just what they said, and that's why they decided to call her the Black Dahlia. So they basically had no suspects, they had no leads, they had no information on who could have possibly committed such heinous crime. They just received like a bunch of just random information from the public, with just like weirdos actually admitting to the crime who didn't do it, which is crazy. Like, you have to be a different type of crazy to admit to killing somebody who you didn't kill. But apparently there was one person who sent in a letter. So basically the letter said, "Here is Dahlia's belongings, letter to follow," whatever that means. And with that letter, they attach a few of her important documents such as her social security number, and they also sent her address book. But in her address book, a page was ripped out of it, so they do believe that that page have the killer's information on it. So that's why they feel like the killer ripped those pages out of her address book. They noticed that the person didn't even write the letter. They basically cut out basically cut out letters from magazine because they didn't want their handwriting to be traced back to them. So they ended up cutting out letters from magazines, and they also doused the letter in kerosene because apparently this will remove whatever DNA or fingerprints that they could have possibly found on the letter. So I feel like if somebody have to go through all of that great length, then they probably was the one who committed the murder. So by February 5th, 1987, 2 arrests were made. So they ended up arresting Robert again, Red. They ended up arresting him again for whatever reason. I'm guessing they just had some suspicions that they just had to follow. So they ended up arresting him again. But once again, he was innocent, so they decided to let him out again. And then they arrest this guy named Den. So basically, Den, like the other weirdos, confessed to killing her. But this time, he actually took the statement back and saying that he was undergoing mental illness when he confessed to killing her. So they ended up letting Den go because they knew that Den didn't kill Elizabeth. Den just wanted attention like the others. So there was a third suspect in Elizabeth's case. His name was actually George Hodel. Basically, everyone think that he's the one who did it. And a lot of the evidence actually point to him. He may be the one who actually did it, to be honest. So basically, a tip was given to the police, I'm not sure by who, that Elizabeth briefly dated George. Like, they were never together. They just, like, dated for a little bit. So police decided to start looking into George's background. So they actually found out that George once sexually assaulted one of his daughters. I'm not sure if that was the only daughter, but it was a daughter. She was like 14 years old. She ended up becoming pregnant. George tried to perform an abortion on her, which was unsuccessful. So they ended up just giving up the baby for adoption. So obviously, this is enough for police to look at him weird. So the problem with this case is it did went to trial. Him impregnated his daughter. That whole case went to trial, but then they decided to let it go for whatever reason. But keep in mind, George is extremely rich. Like, he was extremely rich, so he had good lawyers and could have wiggled his way out of anything. So police decided to bug his home so they can listen in on his conversations that he was having. While they were listening to his conversation on February 18th, 1950, around 8:30 p.m., they actually heard a woman screaming in the background. 2 seconds later, they heard the screaming again, which was weird. So LAPD decided to go to his home to kind of like, see what's going on with all this screaming that's going on here. Kind of like a wellness check. So they decided to go to his home. They didn't find anything, so they ended up leaving. So now they decided to continue listening in on his conversations. So while they were listening in on his conversation, they basically heard him saying, so what if I did kill the Black Dahlia? They wouldn't have been able to prove it because my secretary is now dead. And come to find out, the secretary actually died shortly before this conversation, basically from an accidental overdose. By the time the police actually gather all the information to make the arrest, they decided to go to George's home, and George ended up fleeing the country. His son, to this day, really believed that he was the one who did it. So he have a son. His son name is Steve, and his son said like he knows for a fact that he was the one who did it. And apparently the son said that when they were younger, his dad had like rooms that they weren't allowed to go into. In 2014, they ended up digging up the soil in George's yard just to like check for human remains. And then the soil came back positive. Obviously, it doesn't really give you more information of whose human remains. It would have been, obviously it wouldn't have been Elizabeth because they found her body. But the fact that it came back positive, meaning that he killed several other people and buried them there. But the public, they felt a little weird about his son coming out saying all of this stuff They didn't necessarily board it at first because they felt like he had some sort of vendetta against his dad or something, and this is why he's just trying to get back at his dad. Probably have daddy's issues and stuff. So then he ended up even writing a whole book about his dad. But since George fled the country, there was nothing that could be done with this information because it's not like they could arrest him because he just wasn't here. So this one other young lady, she decided to make a confession, basically saying that she was the one who killed Elizabeth. So obviously at this point, police done already heard like a million confessions who didn't do it. So they're like, lady, like, why are you wasting our time? Like, we're so over this. Like, you know what I'm saying? She basically said that her and Elizabeth were lovers. And when the media found out about this, they were shook because they're like, okay, well, this shit is crazy. Because they're like, well, isn't there some interesting things? Because obviously back in those days, like, being a lesbian was just not as popular as it is today. So people were just like on their toes. Like, this was probably the most interesting thing they've ever heard their entire life. So apparently this woman said that her and Elizabeth were lovers, and she went and picked her up from a bar, saw her with another woman, and then, ended up killing her for whatever reason. They got into a fight, and then she ended up killing her. But then they actually found out that she was lying. But, well, not necessarily lying, but she basically gave police information that no one knew besides police and the killer. So they were shook. They're like, okay, well, maybe she knows something here. So they were like, okay, well, you have my attention. Let me hear more. But then come to find out the information that she had, which I will not repeat, it's just too much. The information that she had, she actually had a girlfriend on the police force, and that's how she was able to get that information. So she basically told police that she was drunk and she came home. She had blood all over her. She don't know where the blood came from, but she just couldn't live with herself because she thought she was the one who killed Elizabeth. She thought she killed somebody, and she went to police before and told police, like, I'm bloody. I don't know what happened. I don't know if I killed somebody, but they kind of like brushed it off, but it was just haunting her. So she just couldn't live with herself, knowing that she was the one who could have possibly killed this young woman. So to this day, Elizabeth's case actually remains unsolved. They have no idea who could have possibly committed this crime, but they actually feel like it could possibly be like a serial killer. Apparently there was like a serial killer that was around, that was active and kind of just killing people in the same style. Like, he was cutting their torso. So they felt like it could have possibly been him, but obviously people are weird, so he could have just probably started killing people in that same manner after Elizabeth's body was found. So yeah, till this day they actually have not been able to solve the case. They have no idea who did it, but I feel like it's pretty evident that George was probably the one who did it. So yeah, but obviously you're innocent until proven guilty, and they weren't able to charge him with anything. So yeah, that is the story of Elizabeth Shorts, aka the Black Dahlia. So yeah, that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you made it this far, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye bye.